I'm Anne Hightower-Patterson, watercolorist and your friend. I'm here to teach you today just a little bit of watercolor basics. I have a long name, so you can just think of me as Anne HP, okay? That makes it good for short. Today we're going to talk about how we lay down a beautiful wash. Now, I teach often at the Newberry Arts Center, and one of the things I see my students struggle with is how to put down a pretty wash. Now, if this looks familiar to you, and it might, this is sometimes how they come out. And so we're going to show you what to do so this doesn't happen. Students get very frustrated when they try to put down a pretty sky or a nice area where paint's supposed to be smooth, and they come up with this. So we're going to talk about briefly the reasons why and how you can get it right. So very often when people get a wash that looks like this, they're trying to get a wash that looks like this. And you can see the difference. This is nice and smooth, and this is kind of blotchy. Okay, so here I have the two pieces of paper. And as I said, most of the time when people are beginning watercolorists and they try to get a wash, it looks like this. Instead, we want it to look like this. So there are a couple of secrets to getting not this, but this, and I'm going to demonstrate them for you. So the first thing that we have to do is use the right size brush. Many times I see students pick up this one brush because it's the size of a pencil and they're comfortable with it, when they really need to use a larger brush. You need to use a size brush that fits the job. And when you're trying to get large sweeps across a piece of paper, you need to use a larger brush. Let me give you some examples. Right here, this is a 1-inch flat brush or a number 12 round brush. And you can use either, whichever you prefer, but I'm gonna do both for you today. So the first thing we've got to do to get a nice smooth wash like this is get a good batch of paint mixed up, because you want to have that color all mixed up in your palette. And I'm using just a nice purple here today. And I don't mean just have a little bit, but you're gonna have a lot. And you wanna have a good puddle mixed up with the color in it, okay? Now, I've got this paper slightly at an angle, and that's going to be able to give me something we call a bead. And you'll see in a minute what I mean by a bead. I'm going to load my brush up with this paint, and it's very, very wet. It's, if you don't get it wet enough, you will find that your paintbrush will drag. So I have to have a lot of paint to go across this surface. And I'm going to sweep all the way across here. And you will notice, you see that little bead of paint? We're going to try and keep that bead of paint moving along. And when I dip back into my palette, I don't add any more water. If I add more water, then I'm going to get an inconsistent amount of water in here, and it's going to flow differently. That's why you need to have a good amount mixed up to pull that bead across and down. And when you get to the point where you feel like your brush is getting a little empty on color, that's when you need to go back to your mixed up color. Now at the very end, I'm going to dry my brush off and pick up that little extra color from the bead, and that's how you get a beautiful wash. Now, there are other kinds of washes that we try to achieve as well. Sometimes we try to get what we call a graded wash. Now, a graded wash is one that changes from one color to another. And this is often useful when we do a sky and landscape. And I'm going to show you in a minute how to do that. But let's take a look at how we're going to do this. I've got my purple there, And I'm going to again make sure I've got a good puddle of purple. And then I'm going to mix up a little bit of yellow. Now in this case right here, I use quinacridone red, but I've got a little pale yellow I'm going to use today. And these are complementary colors, so they go nicely together. And I want a good, nice puddle of both colors. Now, I'm going to rinse my brush so I've got no color in it, and I'm going to pick up again some of my purple. And I'm going to make sure my brush is good and loaded, just like it was up here. And I'm going to draw this across here. This wasn't quite dark enough, so I'll go back and add a little bit of paint to my puddle. No water, just some paint, okay? Now you see my bead is right here, and I'm going to bring it down. All right, now I'm ready to change to the yellow. And as long as this is damp, I can move the paint around a little bit in that surface. But once you see it start to dry, you're going to be a mess if you try to do anything with it. All right, now I've cleaned my brush, and I'm going back and I'm picking up a lot of yellow on my brush, and I'm going into the damp area here and coming across. And again, I still have my bead of color there, but now it's changed to yellow. And that's how you do a graded wash. The one I said before was a graded wash, and I was wrong. This is a variegated wash, kind of like a variegated plant where there's two colors running together in a leaf. This is a variegated wash. This is a graded wash where I've gone from my color purple dark to light. And what I'm going to do to get this is I'm going to start off with a lot of paint and then gradually decrease the amount of paint and add some water, but keeping the amount of wetness even. Okay, so I'm going to build my bead. See my bead over here? My bead of water. Okay, now I want it to start getting a little bit lighter, so I'm going to rinse my brush, dry it off, and come back into my well, but with just a little bit less water. With a little bit more water. Sometimes you get in front of this camera and you can't say what you mean to say. All right, so I've got a little bit more water and a little less paint, but I still have that bead flowing. And now I'm just going to bring it down. Now at this point I'm going to rinse my brush out and dry it and just bring the rest of that paint down. So one final thing I'm going to show you is a real life application of doing this wash. Now you see here I've put this wash down like I may be doing a sky for a landscape, and it is a graded wash where I started darker and come down lighter. I'm going to give you one more tip. If you're doing this and you have a seascape, if you put a piece of masking tape down, make sure it's pressed pretty well here, okay? And that will help you keep your horizon line straight. So that will be good. Now I'm going to demonstrate this using my 1-inch flat brush because this is an even larger space than I was doing before. And over on my palette I've mixed up some blue, enough to do that sky with. And I've mixed up a little orange because I'm going to give this a variegated wash where there's a little bit of warmth, like the sun either coming up or setting. So I'm going to start over here, and I'm going to pull my brush across, and I've got to have enough paint on here to get my bead. Okay, you see my bead over there? Okay. I'm going to work that bead back and across here. Now I'm having a problem that some of you will have. I do not have enough water going on here, and I'm glad that happened, because you can see when it starts dragging like that, you need to pretty quickly go back over here and pick up a little more paint to where it's flowing evenly. Okay. And that's where a lot of people get into trouble. Now I'm going to move this and work this flat now. Don't need to lose my bead. You can see, as long as this is good and wet, I can work back across it, but as soon as it starts to dry, you're going to start picking up paint instead of putting it down, and that's when you get into trouble. Okay, now I'm going to start working into my orange color here, using some red and some yellow. And I'll go come up into the blue area. And one really neat final trick. Say I wanted to have some little light clouds coming through here. If I dry my brush off, I can come and pick up a little light out of here and make some clouds. And there we have a variegated wash that could work into a sky. Now let me take the tape off so you can see. And you could do anything in front of this. You could do trees or a field or the beach, anything you want in front of there. And you will have a nice, beautifully done sky that doesn't have blotches in it. So practice. Practice is the #1 thing. If you take these little squares and practice your washes, in no time at all, you'll have beautiful washes pulling your beads down and filling up your space with very smooth paint.